Greetings, class. I'm recording this at the end of week 6 and the beginning of week 7 and wanted to offer you a few comments. I have finished assessing your IOWs for week 6 and wanted to offer a few comments as they relate to the upcoming week's material, specifically as it relates to the risk principle. I just want to point out something real briefly. In the United States, in our country, there are many different levels of correctional systems. There's of course the federal correctional system, which covers federal prisons as well as federal probation. And there are state correctional systems, which means they are overseen by the state government in some capacity. And oftentimes state correctional systems have what are referred to as state prisons. In addition, some states, but not all, some states have statewide probation and parole departments. So in other words, the community supervision that's going on in the community is overseen by the state government as well. In other states, however, institutional corrections like prisons are overseen by the state, but the correctional system, or systems as the case may be, are overseen at the county level. So take, for example, I teach at the University of Missouri in Kansas City, which is located obviously in the state of Missouri. Missouri has the Department of Corrections, and the Missouri Department of Corrections oversees the state's prison systems and also oversees probation and parole. So if you work for probation and parole in Missouri, you are a state employee, for example. In the state of Kansas has the Department of Corrections, which oversees the prisons within the state of Kansas. But when it comes to community corrections, that is overseen at the county level. It provides different dynamics, and there are different nuances to the different types of systems. The reason I wanted to point it out to you is that there is no real one unified correctional system. The closest thing we have in the United States would be the federal system, but in reality, the federal system, whether we're talking about the federal prison system or the federal probation system, in terms of the raw number of offenders that they oversee, pales in comparison to the number of offenders that are overseen by state and county systems. And I won't even get into, at this point in time, I won't even get into county jails, which is a whole nother thing altogether. The reason I'm bringing this up is simply because many of you made, in your IOWs and IRRs for that matter, but many of you made very sweeping statements relative to whether or not it would be easy to implement actuarial assessments, and why aren't they used more broadly, and why aren't they used wide. We should be go nationwide with these actuarial assessments. And while on its surface that's not a bad recommendation, just generally speaking, because actuarial assessment is a good practice, which I hope has been evident by the readings that you've been doing for the last couple weeks, but actually implementing a procedure, implementing the use of an actuarial assessment is actually quite a formidable task. Now, some of you mentioned that I mentioned in a previous post, video post, that it doesn't cost that much. Relatively speaking, that's true. It doesn't cost a lot of money per se to implement an actuarial assessment tool. So it's not really the monetary cost that serves as a barrier to proper implementation and use of actuarial assessment, as well as any number of other evidence-based practices. It's really the battle lies elsewhere. The battle lies in tradition. The battle lies in the size of the caseload. The battle lies in sometimes political turf, depending on what systems we're talking about and all that. So I hope that you didn't. No one got marked down for this, but I hope I didn't give the impression that it was so easy. And it was just a matter of 2 or 3 steps, and everyone should be using an actuarial assessment tool. It's more complicated than that, because the correctional system is more complicated than that. So I just wanted to share that to share that with you off the bat. Implementing an actuarial assessment tool, though, a good one at least, an effective one, and there are many out there. The CMC was only one example that you were presented with in your reading for last week, for week 6. There are many actuarial assessments that are out there. Some are for what are considered first generation, second generation, third generation. Some scholars consider the field to be in the 4th generation of risk need assessment tools, and that's something we could probably have a whole class, meaning a whole semester's worth of a class about. But there are a lot of different assessments out there, and some are good, some are not so good. Anyway, one of the things that I wanted to share with you relative to your writing, keep in mind that your IRRs and your IOWs are supposed to be two different documents. Certainly one can build off the other. Your IOW, in a sense, should be a revised version of your IRR, but you should not be submitting the same document for your IOW as you did for your IRR. Some of you have started to do things like you copy and paste your IRR. You don't change it at all. You don't edit it all. I mean, I check for those things. So when words are misspelled in your IRR and they are not corrected in your IOW, you're losing points for two different reasons, but they stem from the same thing. Some of you are copying and pasting your IRR into your IOW and then just adding a small paragraph where you respond to some of the comments that you got. That's not entirely appropriate. Keep in mind that your IOW is supposed to be a refined version of your IRR, where you certainly can respond to and use the input from your classmates. But at the end of the day, what your IOW is supposed to do is address the original question. I know I've said this a lot before, but I'm going to say it again at this juncture as well. Your IRR and your IOW both should answer the question. Some of you, I think, might be able to benefit from reviewing the syllabus. I know that might seem kind of strange since we're in week 7 of a 16-week semester, but review the syllabus and review the definitions of the IRRs and the purpose of the IRRs, as well as, of course, the IOWs. And also, please keep in mind that your RTOs, which I think were overall as a whole improved, but there's still some room for improvement in terms of utilizing the material and advancing the discussion. This week, you're going to read a couple of articles by Dr. Chris Lowenkamp and myself, as well as another article involving actually Ed Latessa, Chris Lowenkamp, and myself, all about the risk principle. Now, you've discussed the risk principle before, and you've read about the risk principle before. So I'm anxious to see in your IRRs and actually in all your writing for this week. I'm anxious to see you discuss the risk principle in a way that shows that you understand what the risk principle it is, and that you understand its importance in community correctional intervention, and what happens when we have violations of the risk principle, which can happen one of two ways. You can have a high-risk offender that doesn't get what they need in terms of supervision, treatment, and intervention. And by the way, I tend to use the word intervention broadly, like in essence, and I might expand on this later on in the semester, but really anything we do to intervene, that's the root word of intervention, intervene with behavior, can be considered an intervention. So prison is an intervention, community supervision is an intervention, a rehabilitation and treatment program is an intervention, an electronic monitoring device is an intervention. So anyway, when we have somebody who is high risk and we don't intervene with them at a high enough level, at an intense enough level, that's a violation of the risk principle. Likewise, if we have a low risk offender, somebody who's truly low risk, and please review some of my previous videos for some more information on what we mean by what a low risk person actually looks like. If we have a low risk person who we're intervening with too much, that too is a violation of the risk principle. So in your writing this week, think about what really is going on when violations of the risk principle occur and what the consequences are. In addition, in an email I sent earlier today, please review that as well. I asked you a specific question that you may or may not choose to respond to, but my question, I'll say it again in this video, well, is there any hope for high-risk offenders? When you think about all the things that we do to try to intervene with behavior, all the things that you've read about so far, is there any hope for the truly high-risk offender? And as I mentioned in the email, I certainly hope so, because high-risk offenders return to the community just as low-risk offenders do. So this week is all about risk and the risk principle, and it is my hope that you read the material carefully, that you use the material meticulously, that you use the material and make it obvious that you're using the material in your written responses, and that you, more than anything else, make sure you answer the question. So please ask any questions that you like, and I'll respond to them as I'm able, and I hope you have a great week. Take care. Go Royals.